since your map and data, because did you guys give to the board of the supervisors any like a report and let them know this is a very dangerous lumber, you just lose the deputy. So any report to them, and they give you some like reply. And number two question, it's I think so many police officer, they don't have the enough knowledge probably from you, from or anybody, from medical professional. So do you think that anyone can hire or invite some medical professor from UCLA or USC come to here to give the seminar or class to let them know what's from the science part?
Well, in an ideal world, the Board of Supervisors would ask questions first and then shoot later, but they shoot first and then they ask the questions. That's why you see these rolling deadlines, because they're not lined up. They haven't gone through the meet and confer process with the unions. There's so many things that are out of whack here and disorganized. And there's always that rush to, hey, let's be the first to do something. Let's be the first to impose a mandate. Let's be the first to do this or that. We saw that throughout the pandemic, and a lot of stuff was not based on hard data, like deciding which businesses were essential and which were not essential. Prime example. And that was not based on science. That was based on just policy decision.
Other government agencies like police departments and school districts have shown that employees will get vaccinated if it's a requirement to remain employed. Why do you think your deputies will be any different, and could it be that your public statements are contributing to the low figures?
Actually, quite the opposite. I think the fact that I've been encouraging people to get vaccinated, I'm vaccinated, you have to lead by example. Well, if you go throughout the entire state of California, I'm no different than pretty much every other sheriff. And if you look at Southwest Airlines, American Airlines, their entire operation was shut down because pilots did not want to get vaccinated. And who's flying the planes? People that can say, you know what, I'm retired, I'm done with this. People vote with their feet, and that's the moral of the story here. When you have a captive audience that has no alternative, it's easy to impose a mandate like that. When you have alternatives, it doesn't work so great. And people have to respect the difference between the two. And here, like in the military, it's real easy to impose a mandate because you can't go anywhere. But everyone here is working voluntarily to provide public safety. In fact, when there was no vaccine, these are the very same people that the same community relied on to stick their nose and to get potentially infected. And we lost 50 members of our department due to COVID. And the majority of them were pre-vaccine. And that's a sad commentary, because now the same people that benefited from them answering 911 calls, manning the county jail system, actually transporting, dealing with people that are COVID positive, and they had no protection whatsoever. They had to do it because of the nature of their job. I think we need to start slowing down this whole business about the mandates. And I'll give you a prime example. The nation of Israel has the highest, I think, COVID, vaccination rate in the world, and is one of the highest infection rates in the world. And so there's a lot of curiosities there statistically, but let's slow down on the mandates. Let's start working with our employees to get them to voluntarily comply. Phil?
When was the last time you actually spoke to a supervisor?
About 2 weeks ago.
And I know there's more questions, but can I just throw out an invitation? Is any of your sworn personnel in here that's choosing not to get vaccinated, would they be willing to come up and share the reasons why?
Good question. Most people in this room are vaccinated.
They are? Okay.
Yes. Sir.
Sure, thank you. Patrick Keeley from Channel 4. It's been ages with COVID.
I relate.
I hear your arguments, again, about the supervisors, and as Phil asked earlier, these arguments to persuade them to try to relent on the vaccine mandate. But until that point, until they change the county's policy, are you and your deputies telling the public it's okay to ignore laws you don't like and then not face any consequences for it?
Well, the problem is, one, it's not a law. This is an employer mandate imposed by an entity that does not.
We're talking semantics, though. It's a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And we all face requirements in our lives. Are we being told we can ignore them if we don't like them?
Well, I'm saying is that when you're the body that's issuing a requirement, can the Board of Supervisors issue you a requirement to get vaccinated? You'll say no because they're not your
Well, no,
boss.
they have. In certain circumstances, you go indoor bars, you have to be vaccinated.
And that, who does that? The bar itself, the establishment.
Okay,
The
but
Board
no,
of Super-
The county can't tell me
right.
as a citizen to do that, and the county is telling deputies as a condition of their employment to do that. My question remains, by not following this, by taking this position, are you and the deputies telling the public you can ignore laws you don't like, you can ignore requirements?
Not at all. Not at all. What we're doing is, one, we're not mandating that the public gets a vaccine. And we have to deal with the public, vaccinated, unvaccinated, with COVID, without COVID. We're still have to deal with them. So we have the deputies do all their precautions. We had deputies suited up in all the PPE gear going into calls for service on a 911 call. Imagine that. And this is pre-vaccine. No one said a word about it other than thanking the deputies for what they're doing. Now the tables have reversed somehow, in a sense, in some people's mind, and I'm just not buying that argument at all. I think we're better off pursuing a voluntary, encouraging people. Instead of using the hammer approach, there's a carrot method. Why are we not using the carrot? Why are you not encouraging people to get vaccinated? And there's ways we can do that successfully. It'll lead to a higher rate of vaccination for our employees, and armed with information about, are we actually, what happened to the contract tracing? Did it just disappear? Do you have any outbreak that came tied to a deputy? We have none.
Sure, forgive me though, we're talking about policy right now. The policy has already been adopted by the county, and my question to you is specifically, are you and your deputies sending the public a message, you can ignore requirements you don't like?
We're not sending that message at all. No, you're editorializing what you want to believe, which is fine. That is your right.
Not at all.
But I'm not buying that.
Do you agree with the science? I mean, do you reject the idea that your deputies who are unvaccinated can carry and infect somebody else if they're carrying the virus?
Well, what we do know is that, first, and this is part that people are not realizing, we're in October of 2021. We've been living with this virus now for close to approaching 2 years. When you're sick, you stay home. If you're someone who has an issue, get vaccinated. By all means, it helps everyone to get vaccinated. However, you can still infect with the COVID. You can still affect with the vaccination. You can be in a carrier with the vaccination. So it's not a foolproof method. It reduces the odds. It does not eliminate the odds. And we're here playing the odds. So the point is, if you're wearing a mask, you're minimizing contact. Well, again, how many people are eating at a restaurant, but then you're worried about a cop that may or may not show up at your door on a call for service? I think I'm looking at risk that each person is bearing, and the collective risk does not justify this type of an intrusion. I think that should be up to the individual. And let's go back to the smallpox, turn of the century. They had a 30% mortality rate, and if you survived, you were going to be really disfigured. And that's the Supreme Court decision from 1905 people talk about. That decision was a guy who challenged a $5 fine for not getting the vaccination. He wasn't fired, he wasn't jailed, he didn't want to pay a $5 fine. I think that's lost in all this analysis.
Stephanie, last
Sheriff,
question.
have you considered like an incentive program, to increase your vaccination rate among your sworn deputies?
That's what I want to explore with my personnel, what we can do in terms of incentive. And I agree, that's a system that makes sense. Yes?
Stephanie?
It seems a little ironic that first responders, as you said, are being forced to do this considering they were on the front lines of the pandemic. Would you say that this law or guidance is what it should be really, is arbitrary, especially when it comes to the sheriff's department?
Oh, it's extremely arbitrary. I guarantee you that. If you look at all the surrounding counties, as we see, there is no mandate. Is there any difference in the infection rate in the surrounding counties? No. There's only one county that's trying to defund and destaff the sheriff's department. That's Los Angeles County. In fact, they're unique in the entire nation. All of the areas that have had issues with defunding law enforcement, New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, the two Rochesters, they've already backpedaled, done a 180, and now fully funded their law enforcement. In fact, now they're begging to get people to join their ranks because they were depleted because of the whole defunding movement. The only one entity in the entire nation is steadfast in defunding is the LA County Board of Supervisors.
Why do you think?
They have a very weird group of people that are in charge. Really. They worship at the altar of wokeism, and they don't understand that their own community is saying, no, we want to see deputies on the street. We want to see reform where reform can be made, but not eliminating the criminal justice system, not taking cops away from the street. That's the last thing they want to see. But the people are making up all these plans. They literally live in the ivory tower. They do all their meetings on Zoom. They don't have any interaction with the public. They don't even bother picking up the phone to call me as a sheriff. Hey, what would happen if we do this? The most common sense thing you could do when you develop any policy. They didn't even bother with that.